Hey, this is Pastor Tom with North Glencoe Baptist Church, and you're watching Not Another Church Podcast. This is a weekly podcast featuring church staff and your host, Pastor Tom. So thanks for tuning in. Satan sows discord among the brethren, which is, I've shocked people before when somebody came to me and said, hey, did you hear that so-and-so? And I said, stop, that is satanic. And when I use that phrase, there's like this look of, oh, what do you mean satanic? Yes. And then I will explain. Satan is the one that sows discord among the brethren. You are being satanic, literally, right now.
Get thee behind me, Satan.
And so we just have to be careful of that side of it as well. And taking each issue and trying to separate the politics out of it and trying to look at scientifically, logically, what's best for our country, what's best for my children, all of those kind of questions that we ask as we vote in today's world is a whole lot more difficult than it was even 10 years ago. I mean, it's mind-boggling to me to the level that it's gotten so quickly. So,
well, speaking of level, I mean, I know I've said this before as we've talked over the last few weeks. There are times that I have to take a break from social media on purpose because there is a particular subject that becomes sort of takes over my mind, my thought patterns. I'm spending my day in between times that I can get on social media and I'm pondering this, thinking about it, looking at everything through that lens. And it changes and skews my worldview. It changes how I look at others with compassion. And politics has been one of those things. There have been days that I have just thought, why in the world did I even open, Twitter? Or you followed the thread that goes along with it. Why did I do that? And then I get off and I think, okay, you've got to stop this. And I've literally had to take a break. Usually I try to listen to a sermon or, something like that. But it happens all the time. I mean, we see that we have to take a break from those kind of things. You have to realize what you're feeding yourself.
And like what we said with TV, whatever you're bringing in, that's what's in you.
Yeah.
And so we have to be careful of that. And I think in the last, it's been 6 weeks now that I have consciously decided that I'm only going to look at Facebook, and it's literally on my calendar a 30-minute period where I go through and try to make sure that nobody in the church is in the hospital or dying or anything crazy like that's going on, and just like, so people don't think that I'm being ugly, and then I shut it down, and it has improved my mental health just massively because that time that I was spent, because you can fall down the rabbit hole. How many times have you sat down and said,
it's so much deeper than the rabbit hole. Look, it is. I look up and all of a sudden I'm Doug and I'm like, I'm Columbia. I am so far away from where I started. It is not even funny.
I'm 3 articles in and 500 comments later.
Oh my goodness.
3 bowls of popcorn.
I drive away from the politics and go to the office memes.
Yeah. I end up in so many.
I don't. I actually will dig in deeper. I will every link in the comments that you need to read this. I'm like, okay, and I go read that.
This conspiracy
read that article,
it's like I started with politics and all of a sudden I'm locating the location of where Tupac, Elvis, and Johnny Cash and all those guys are hanging out still, and JFK.
I'm in there reading and I'm like, okay, this is the conservative viewpoint. Now what's the other side of it? So I go look deliberately for that, and I'm trying to balance my mind, and then I realize what I've done is actually let me go too far. I've gotten to where it's become my central focus for the day or the week or whatever it is, and realize, okay, I got to stop.
Yeah, I literally have had times where I look up at the clock and I realize it's 3 a.m.
Oh, goodness.
And so, which is why I on purpose have a scheduled time, and I literally have an alarm that goes off that says, shut it off. And so, again, I would strongly recommend that policy to any believer because it keeps you from dropping down that hole to China.
And it's one of the recent Apple updates a year or two ago, whenever they started sending you the weekly time, like how much time you spend on average on your screen.
I don't want to look at that.
It's like, that can't be true. But I go back and look at the stats. It's like, wow, you could do so much more with your life. You are wasting so much time.
Yes.
Well, and as embarrassing as that is, 16 hours.
Yeah, it's like, what in the world?
I didn't even realize I was awake for 16 hours.
There's 16 hours in a day? What?
Imagine having that conversation with Jesus, but I didn't have time to pray. Well, let's look at these stats.
Oh, no.
no.
Oh, man.
Oh, if he pulls my stats up.
I am in so much trouble.
So you didn't have time to do what? Now let's talk about time.
Yes.
All right. So as we went through the text, we saw that, and it was interesting as I stepped off into we should obey authority. It was really funny to kind of look around the room and see at times people going, yes, kind of shaking their head. We agree. And then other times people are like, I don't know about that.
You know what they said? I don't know about that was when you hit the part that says if there is an elected official that you didn't vote for and you still have to honor them. And then everybody
You can't say that's not my president. Like you,
No matter
the fact
who
that
it
you-
is, this
the fact
one
that
or
you
others,
Can't
yeah.
say that. It was like
That's
I
when
don't-
everybody in the room went, now, wait a minute. Let's not go too far.
Don't like it.
we don't want that. Jesus might not really care about that. You know.
Well, I did not realize with Peter saying that to honor the emperor, I did not realize until I spent this week how absolutely depraved Nero was. I really thought that we hit top depravity with Caligula, and then as I was reading about Nero killing his mom, Nero getting a girlfriend, and then kicking her to death. I mean, who does that?
Jesse was sitting with something. She goes, "Man, I'd hate to go out like that." And she's like, "That just seems tiring." I was like, "Yeah, that seems pretty rough."
A lot of
Jesse."
kicks.
Tiring. That was
Yeah.
the one she
She said, "Just seems like a lot." It's like,
great,
you know what?
Jesse.
I'm pretty worn out. Yeah, that would be pretty tired.
I think I'm going to stop before she dies. Yeah, I'm tired now. No, we laugh about it because it's an uncomfortable subject. Hearing about Nero, I said to you, I think before we started the broadcast today, he's the one who lit the Christians on fire and used them as kind of living candles out in his gardens.
That's sick.
For people to walk past. And you go back in history and you read these details and you look at the absolute depravity of humankind. And we can spend a lot of time looking at that going, yeah, I can see that. Humans are depraved, and yeah, sometimes I'm kind of mean. But then when you really start to look at your own heart and you see the depths of your own depravity, which I think is what you drove to in this part of your sermon.
Well, I wanted us to recognize that the person that would have been in mind, as Peter says, honor the president, we want to think, well, it was a good guy. I mean, we want to honor the people that we like, that we agree with. I mean, I want to have a bust of Ronald Reagan in my living room because I like him. But, nobody's got a bust of Millard Fillmore in their living room. And so the person that Peter, when he wrote this, I can't keep bumping that mic, the person that Peter would have had in mind, everybody would have been, really? We got to honor him?
Yeah.
So God made sure that the example that we would have in front of us is no matter what that person does, no matter whether you like them or not. In fact, Nero would be the one who, tradition tells us, took Peter's head off. So it would get real personal. He commands the believers that he's writing the first letter to honor him. So
That doesn't mean like him or like the evil parts of him.
No, not at all. It's kind of like, when people assume that forgiving somebody means accepting what they did. No, we're not saying that you go, yeah, it's okay for you to beat me, or it's okay for you to cuss me out, or it's okay for you to steal from me. What you're saying is I'm not going to let that person own me. And I think there's a lot of Christians today that let politics on the opposite side of the aisle own them and define them. It says more about us than it does about President Obama if we say, he was never my president. Well, for 8 years, yeah, he was.
Well, and like we just talked about the phone thing, like it all of a sudden becomes something that is much more of a distraction, that is much more of an idol, that is much more of a time and energy and joy sucker than it is anything beneficial in my life anymore. I mean, because I'm caught up every conversation. And like we talked about, like it shouldn't, but every conversation that turns in that's about faith somehow gets tied back to, well, this is what I believe politically, and that's how. Yeah. And it's not necessarily before there was still Jesus and Christianity and our eternity being settled before there was a right and left, donkey and elephant, in the United States or anything thereof. And so like that becomes so much more of an issue than it does beneficial for anybody, both on either party, on either side of the spectrum. It's just so, like you talked about, so divisive, and I think Satan uses that to divide our people, divide our country, and to we're much more focused on ourselves and what's going on than it is.
And don't we see evidence of it right now?
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, you cannot deny what's happening within our own country right now and how we have become so divided. And that we can't just agree to disagree, that public discourse, the ability to be able to have a debate on a subject, we are trying to, allowing it, however you want to define that, it's being hammered right now.
All right, with that, we end today's podcast. Thanks for watching Not Another Church Podcast with your host, Pastor Tom. We want to invite you to join us Sundays for small group at 9 a.m., worship services starting at 10 a.m., and you can find North Glencoe Baptist Church live each week on Facebook and our northglencoe.org website. If you miss church, no worries. Our past services are easily accessible. They're archived on YouTube, Vimeo, Facebook. Make sure to stay up to date by following northglencoe.org. Go serve your King.